Good morning, Life in Jesus students. Welcome to your Lab 2 Day 2 Ed Puzzle video. Most important, I have an announcement at the beginning. I mentioned at the last assembly that Mr. Genuine had prepared an interpretive dance for everyone. I encourage you to go to his open lab. Anytime he looks busy, ask him to perform that for you. And let's go ahead and get started. So today we're talking about law in three different types: eternal, moral, and natural law. First off, I just want to say, what is a law? Well, it's something that governs us, and it's something that is true. And laws should be true. So let's move on. We're actually going to start by talking about something called relativism. And relativism is basically the idea that there are no laws that govern our moral behavior. There are no moral rules that apply to all cultures or peoples, and no country or person should impose their moral rules on one another. So it's this idea that the only moral rule is that there are no moral rules. So, two examples of that. In medieval Japanese culture, there was something called sujigiri, which I probably just butchered the pronunciation of. But basically, when a samurai forged a new sword, they would test it out by going out to the local crossroads and cutting in half the first person they saw walking along the road. And this was considered completely okay in their culture. It was actually considered something noble, and it would mean that you had a good sword. You could cut the person in half. They thought there was nothing wrong with that. That probably seems a little ridiculous. A current modern day example is that currently in Africa and the Middle East, there's a cultural practice known as female genital mutilation, where basically around the time women hit puberty, something called female circumcision happens, where certain parts of the female's genitalia are essentially cut off, they're removed, and it's meant to encourage them to live sexually pure. And this is a huge human rights offense. So a lot of people have spoken out about this. And despite the fact that these cultures said this was okay, Christians believe that doesn't make that okay, that there is a higher law, that even if these laws said this was okay, there's a higher law that governs us and that says this is not right. The problem is we see strands of morality in our culture as well, right? We hear people say, well, I wouldn't do that, but I'm not going to, judge them. Or we hear people say, well, I don't want to push my morality on them. Or we hear people say, hey, you do you. And really, this is kind of, one, I think people are uncomfortable having these conversations. Two, I think it's a rejection of this idea that there's a good life and there's a way we ought to live, and there's a higher law than these cultural norms. There is something higher than that should govern us. We'll talk about this more in class. It's kind of a complicated concept. Oh, God bless me. Anyways, go ahead and open up your textbook to page 29. Read the entire page and be ready to answer a question about it. So the two examples you just read are an example that there is a law that governs us, that there's an order to creation, that just as you wouldn't go around walking backwards everywhere, there are certain things we shouldn't do because of the order, the way we've been created. So eternal law is kind of a complicated and abstract concept. And it's basically that there is order, there's a purpose, there's a wisdom in creation. That when God created, there was a purpose, and everything in the universe reflects that. So you wouldn't go outside and throw a ball up in the air and what you would expect it to come down, right? Because it follows the laws of physics. If you were in an argument and you said something that had no logic to it, right, that you wouldn't expect that to convince someone. Just like that, right, there are laws to how we ought to act, that you shouldn't go out and hurt other people and expect to live a happy life. That is just as much a law as the laws of physics, the laws of science, the laws of math. So one of the types of law that is reflected from eternal law. So eternal law is this kind of overarching concept. Within eternal law, you have the laws of physics, the laws of language, the laws of math. And within that too, you have something called moral law. And these are the specific laws or rules that lead to a good life that allow us to fulfill our purpose. So if our purpose is to live in loving relationship with God forever, moral law helps us get there. So following it leads to freedom because we become who we were meant to be. We were meant to be good people who love others. Moral laws show us the path of how to do that. Now, for Catholics and in Christian morality, moral law is objective. So this is not based on personal feelings. So it doesn't change. If you say, well, I feel like doing this, well, I feel like going out and partying, I feel like doing this, that doesn't make something okay. Right? It rejects relativism and applies to everyone. So it rejects this idea that law just depends on culture, that how we act just depends on where we grew up. And it says, no, there is a bigger truth than that. And we also believe that this moral law can be known two ways. One, through natural human reason, and two, through revelation. So through the Bible, through the church, etc. So natural law. Natural law is our ability to understand moral law through reason. And it allows us to determine good and bad. But it's this idea that God's law is written on our hearts. So for example, if you go back to that relativism, that those ideas of relativism I gave, someone through reason should be able to figure out it's not okay to kill a random passerby, or it's not okay to remove part of the sexual organ of women just because the culture is that. Through human reason, we should be able to know what is right and wrong, that you don't need someone to tell you that you shouldn't kill and steal, right? That those are things we should naturally know are not right. So again, this idea that God's law is written on our hearts, it's from Paul's letter to the Romans, that we have this natural ability, hence natural law, to know right and wrong, good and bad. So I'd like you to read an example of this in the textbook. It brings up the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and how that has been a part of every major religion and culture. Why? Because it speaks to the heart of natural law, that we should treat others how we would like to be treated. Go ahead and read that. Be ready to answer a question about it. All right, that is all for today. Look forward to discussing this in class. Like I said, especially those times Mr. Denwine seems annoyed or busy, those are the best times to ask him about his interpretive dance skills. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe, and I look forward to talking to you.